everyone, and welcome back to Lights Out Latest. My name is Marina, and I'm here with my fellow Formula One friends, Tristan, Steven, and Jason. And today we're going to talk all things costs of F1, whether that be the cost cap, travel, costs of each part on the car, everything. But before we get into that, let's start with some breaking news. Red Bull did a pit stop in the dark, 2.84 seconds, which happens to be faster than a lot of teams have done pit stops this year on the grid.
Well, we know why they did that.
Yeah, they're just showing off and just trying to prove.
Get back at McLaren for that one. I mean,
if you lose a Guinness World Record, if you lose a Guinness World Record, you might as well get it back in spectacular fashion in some way.
I was gonna say, are they getting that Guinness World Record for that? Was that like the fastest?
So I think they
in the dark.
They'll get a record for like the fastest pit stop in the dark.
Wow.
Which I don't know that existed before.
Guinness has a record for that, I'm sure.
It's so petty.
It is.
It really is.
It's so petty. And it was just it was exactly aimed towards what we talked about last week. Was McLaren got that Guinness World Record for the fastest pit stop, and they got the fastest pit stop of the year, and they were like, no, we're gonna
They're besides themselves.
Go again.
To be fair, the whole Red Bull pit crew could probably do it with their eyes closed. Like, they're that good.
Definitely. But I don't think that's just Red Bull. I mean, like, up and down the grid, everyone can do it with their eyes closed. I mean, they have to practice so much that if
McLaren did that? They just struck back and like, no, we did it.
That would be so funny. If this just turned into
with
a
Monster
beef
Energy. Monster Energy's there's new sponsor. So Monster Energy's like, hey, Red Bull did this. Let's do this.
That would be a cool video idea. Oh my god, social teams got to get on that.
Energy drink companies.
Oh yeah.
There's gonna be a series on that, like on both channels, like Monster Energy and Red Bull channels, being like McLaren versus Red Bull pit stop challenge.
Honestly, it brings up a great question. I wonder if there was like any. I specifically can't remember. You guys might have any like really big pit road mishaps this year. I don't think there really were. I don't remember any like mistakes or just gun jamming or something. I don't know.
There's little stuff, but nothing like major. I don't think.
Was it like Yuki who ran over like one of the guns or something? There was something in the pit lane recently.
Oh, I remember Baku. Was that this year when they closed the pit lane and Ocon still had to make his pit stop?
So he was forced to make an illegal pit stop, is what you're saying?
I don't think so. I think that was like last year. But this year, recently, there was something...
No, that was this year.
Was it?
It was this year.
Yeah. They started closing the pit lane a lap early. Ocon came in on the last lap.
I remember this.
And literally there are people in the pit lane. Look at this.
Crazy. In the pit lane, and people almost got run over, and he was like, what the hell?
Terrible.
No.
Now I know what you're talking about.
Cringed at that one.
Yep.
Anyways, in other news, the FIA, whether it be by mistake or on purpose, has released the new team names for a couple of the F1 teams when they released their official entries for 2024. Alfa Romeo becoming Stake F1 Team Kick Sauber. Worst name I've ever heard.
I was gonna say, golly. What's that livery gonna look like?
I don't understand.
So we got SFTKS. All right. So what is this? It's Svitska. I don't know.
Oh god.
I saw a video earlier that was like, this is gonna turn into the Drive to Survive scenes with Mercedes where they like can't remember what the team name is. This is like, gonna be exactly the same thing. Like, there's no way they're gonna remember this name.
No, not at all.
Is Stake like? Is that the budding company?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the one that's
and Kick is like their streaming platform.
Yeah.
Oh, it's that. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
Which is weird. So one company has two different names. Like, you thought it would just be like Stake Sauber F1 team or Kick Sauber F1 team, but they said no, we're doing Stake Kick Sauber. So it's like
not even next to each other too. It's Stake F1 team Kick Sauber. Like what?
But they decided to put F1 team in like the middle of the name. Like you have
that is weird.
Yeah, why couldn't they have just ended the name with like F1? Just like, here's our the name itself, F1. I don't know.
Like if it was like maybe Stake Sauber Kick F1 team would have been so much better.
Yeah.
You're just rewording slightly the same sponsors.
You know what would be interesting with this? I know I kind of mentioned it briefly earlier, but Drake has like a huge sponsorship with Steak. I wonder if you're gonna see OV on that car at one point. That would be crazy. Could you
It'd be beautiful.
imagine?
It'd be awesome. I didn't.
Like
I forgot that Drake had that sponsorship.
like a livery, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. You know,
I
Drake's
mean, he
gonna be
did
betting
just
on
drop an
F1 now.
album last year, right, or something? I think.
Yeah. Well, yeah. He released an EP not long ago.
Oh, okay. Well, if he releases something
But
else,
no,
maybe we'll see
yeah.
that on the car.
Yeah. Well,
Who knows?
also, AlphaTauri's new name, pretty much the same. Scuderia AlphaTauri, Red Bull, or RB.
Very well done.
They're just rebranding to make it back to, what it was as Toro Rosso.
Yeah.
I
miss that
remember
Toro
very
Rosso.
Yeah, well, at the very beginning of the year, they were discussing whether they were going to sell or keep it and make it a true Red Bull sister team again. So they decided to make it a true Red Bull sister team. They're going to have a lot of parts from this year's car going into next year. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with that.
My thing is like, how many times are we gonna? Not to cut you off there.
You're good.
I'm curious to see when we're gonna see a consistent name for that team. Like, I feel like it's like every year or every 2 years, it's like, oh, we're changing the name again. I don't know if it's just like an ownership issue or what it is, but it's
since they moved away from Toro Rosso, they've just been, they went to AlphaTauri, and then now they're changing again because AlphaTauri is like not worth it apparently. So
AlphaTauri was around for what, like 5 or 6 years, I think, maybe
It's been
less.
a while.
It has been a while.
2020, right?
Yeah.
2020.
Yeah.
2019.
What Daniel Kvyat never raced for AlphaTauri, did he? That he was the last year for Rosso.
Yeah, he did. He did.
He was the first year of AlphaTauri.
So 2020 then.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I remember they had this big fashion show for the reveal event.
Oh my
they
God,
had the car on stage
right.
behind the curtain,
my gosh.
and then they did a whole fashion show around this curtain, and only at the very end of this half-hour fashion show did they reveal the car.
Oh yeah, we have this thing sitting in the corner. You want to go see it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Ferrari, speaking of kind of fashion show launches, whatever, Ferrari is set to launch their car on the 13th of February of next year. With that, there's also been speculation that they're going to do a double contract announcement instead of doing them separately. They're just going to announce Carlos and Charles' contract together. I've seen a lot of stuff, a lot of tweets and things saying we really don't want this because it will make Charles overshadow Carlos, because the expectation is that Charles's contract is going to be a lot longer than Carlos's. So
fair.
I guess. I don't know. I mean, if the guy's getting paid millions, I personally wouldn't rather care.
Yeah.
He's the only Ferrari driver that won last year, so I mean, I don't know. I feel like he's going to be competitive regardless. It doesn't matter. It's whatever. It's what it is.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Yeah, me and my brother were talking about this earlier today. We were talking about how, who we would like to see in the second Red Bull, because we're always, dissing Checo, and, we don't like Checo. Well, he was watching a video that was why everyone at Oracle Red Bull Racing loves Checo. And I was like, they would not be caught dead making a video like that for Max, because they only have to do this because of the bad press that Checo's gotten this year.
Yeah, have to do it for marketing reasons.
He was like, I'd love to see Lando as a second driver at Red Bull. And I was like, Lando doesn't deserve to be a second driver. He should be a number one driver. And he goes, what about, I was like, what about Carlos? Carlos is already a second driver at Ferrari, but he could do so much more at Red Bull. And he was a Red Bull junior.
Yeah, so he came up through Toro Rosso, and he was all Red Bull Junior.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's something we could. I mean, if people have talked about him going to Audi, him leaving Ferrari. I mean, maybe Red Bull will be like, oh, we want you, we'll take you.
He's also a good team player with Charles. So I feel like, I don't know, just a solid teammate duo there. Why break up a good teammate duo when they could both be like, yeah, we have competitive cars. We'll race each other clean for 1-2 if possible. I don't know.
Yeah.
It works. It works in some ways, and sometimes it doesn't.
Ferrari's the closest team, at least in that upper echelon of F1, that actually has two really good drivers. I mean, they both
two
could
on
win
par
a race
drivers,
easily. Exactly.
Well developed drivers too.
Well balanced. You have Max and Checo, where you have Max really superior to Checo. You have Lewis and George, which Lewis is still. I mean, George is creeping up there, but Lewis is still very much more consistent. He's still the superior driver. You have Aston Martin, you have Lance versus Fernando. But Ferrari
That's
has
actually a
that
good
too.
point. That is a
Really
good
like
point, Steven. Yeah.
so does
They're
McLaren.
very balanced.
McLaren
I think
has
that the
two who
last
are
time
well
we
balanced, but
last
Lando
Oscar's
time
has
we
really
probably
young.
so
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're both
Bottas versus
really good.
Hamilton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it wouldn't make
Well,
sense for Ferrari to replace Sainz with even Hamilton or Verstappen because
Mhm.
no.
Sainz is already so close to Leclerc, and Leclerc on his best days are just as good or better than Max or
Yeah.
Lewis. So it's like,
Here's my
oh,
question though.
why shake it up?
If say Ferrari gets everything figured out, they get a really good new car, they get, their strategy fixed, and all of a sudden they have this 1-2 punch that we have never seen before in F1. Like, I almost wonder if we're gonna see like a rule change, or maybe I don't know, something like that. You know what I mean? Just like there's an unfair advantage between Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc.
Man.
You know, it's fun to think about. I mean, I
I
don't
mean-
know
We
if it'll
saw it
happen,
started
but
2022. They're fighting. They got like 1-2 in Bahrain, and they were really
Yeah.
quite the duo. I'm just waiting for
Yeah.
Ferrari
Yeah.
to have a decent car.
That would
I'm
just
really
scream
curious-
skill issue to me. It's just like look at the rest of the grid and be like, all right, skill issue, get better drivers then.
yeah,
would be
I mean,
so
it could help the sport
curious-
for sure.
Yeah, I'd be so curious to see, given if Ferrari was given a great car, firstly, who would come out on top? But if they're so close, I'm assuming Ferrari would take Charles as number one because they don't have
Yeah.
a clear number one for two drivers. So you can't put team orders into play there. Like, you just gotta, I guess you could either let them fight for it
Yeah.
and do
Well,
like no team orders all season long, or you gotta pick someone. Right?
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
I'm just
Yeah.
I
I
love
think it
racing
would be
too much.
Charles.
That's
Yeah.
kind of the benefit of all the other teams that we've talked about, Mercedes and Red Bull. You don't have to pick one. There's just a clear superior driver. So
Yeah.
in that
yeah.
case, Checo or whoever is kind of working, I guess. I mean, he's doing his job. He's
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
way.
He finished
We
P2.
don't-
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
not causing problems yet.
No, exactly.
It's-
Yeah. We've talked about that Red Bull dynamic. But
Yeah.
I don't want to get into the weeds
you're
of it too
basically
much
setting for a
to
backup
keep going
role.
off topic, but now bringing up team orders. I'm too much of a lover of racing that I just hate the idea of team orders so much. But again,
Yeah.
that could be a whole podcast
absolutely.
topic in and of itself.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so
Well-
many economics and politics involved with that. It's just
yeah.
100%. Yeah. Well, let's move on to some former F1 drivers who have just been announced for other series. Roman Grosjean and Nick Kvyat are going to be racing for Lamborghini in World Endurance. And Jensen Button is also going to be in World Endurance next year.
Cool
So-
stuff.
I love this, especially for Roman Grosjean. I mean, obviously his F1 career didn't go as well as he wanted to. He did
Yeah.
pretty decent in that new car, and I assume he's still going to stay in a new car. I think he switched teams a couple of times now, but
Yeah, he's
now seeing him,
he's at a new team now.
yeah.
Yep.
So now seeing him, getting his chance in WEC, I mean, hey, Lamborghini, where else better to do it, in my opinion? I mean, I'm a little biased because I love Lamborghini, but to see him
I'm
back
happy
in the
for
sport
Daniel,
and have
man.
Roman.
Yeah,
that's
I'm
cool
happy
too,
for
for
Daniel
sure.
because Daniel hasn't. I mean, he raced 2 NASCAR races, I think, this past year. But
Was he the one
since
that ran for, like,
I don't
the,
think he's. What?
Well, I was going to say, did he run for Trackhouse?
No,
Is
he
that
ran
what it
for actually a European team that was collabing with an American team just to make the car happen. It was called
yeah,
I don't want to say it wrong. It was like it started with an H. But they were
Yeah.
like they raced in like 2 races. They
I
had
think
him
which one
race.
you're talking about.
But Daniel,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think he's done anything since that. I don't think
His
he's.
career's been pretty limited by this whole Russia-Ukraine thing because they he wouldn't speak out against it. He wouldn't condemn the war. Like, all of the Russian drivers they basically came out and condemned the war, and then he couldn't participate in FIA events because he was
He wouldn't come out
Russian
and
and
say that
didn't
he was
condemn it
against
or
it.
anything. So it kind
I
of like
didn't know that.
blocked his career a bit. Yeah. So he couldn't
Interesting.
compete in FIA events because he wouldn't condemn the war for Russia and Ukraine. And so he just kind of like blocked his career a bit because there were a lot of series that he just couldn't race in anymore because he wouldn't say it, and he wouldn't not race under the Russian flag because you can't. They like even in like other sports like tennis, like Russian tennis players, they compete with no flag.
Yeah.
So
What's like
I
the
think he just
what is it?
wouldn't do that.
What is it? The IOU in the Olympics?
IOC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess actually that's different because that's just for people that don't have a country that's represented, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, there's
but
also Was it Russia? Who doesn't compete as their own
well, that's
country?
what
Is it
that's what I
Russia?
was trying to say.
I
Is
think it's Russia. Yeah.
yeah, they're on like a different name or something like that
Yeah.
on
That's
the
what
Olympics.
Nikita Mazepin competed as. It was like RAF, like Russian
Yeah,
Athlete Federation. So they weren't
something like
representing
that.
Russia,
Yeah,
the country. They were just
yeah,
saying, I'm a Russian athlete, not
yeah.
the
Yeah.
country.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, we're talking kind of on the concept of other categories. And I think Jason, you put this on our notes for today. Is F1 pulling manufacturers from other series? You know, we've seen this Honda F1 is Ford now as well.
Yep.
Audi. So
Yeah, I
It's interesting. Go ahead.
wanted to say it's really great that the cost cap came in and F1 understands what manufacturers want with their engines, and they've been able to make it cheap enough and make sense enough that Ford is willing to partner up. GM signed up to be a supplier from 2028 onwards. You have Audi coming in, literally buying out Sauber over the next couple of years. You had Porsche, which they always kept saying they're going to join, and then they didn't join. But then they kind of passed it off to Audi because they're both under the same Volkswagen parent company. And then you have the likes of like IndyCar, who had Honda and GM, but Honda just threatened to leave because IndyCar's engine costs are too high. They're trying to go to hybrid engines, and Honda's supplying like half the grid with engines, and they can't. The costs are too high. And what was it? Only a couple years ago, Honda said, "Oh no, we're gonna pull out of F1. It's too expensive." I
yeah,
think it was like 2021, and then they
yeah,
started winning. And then on top of that, F1 started redoing the engine regs, and they're like, "Wait, let's stay
We
in
can do
F1
this now.
and drop." Maybe now they're like, "All right, since we're spending more on F1, let's drop other series like
yeah,
IndyCar." So yeah, I think F1 is going in the right direction with cutting costs and attracting new manufacturers. And like IMSA and WEC, they've attracted a ton of new,
Oh
Lamborghini,
yeah,
BMW, Cadillac, Acura, so many Peugeot, so many new engine manufacturers and teams. And other series like NASCAR and IndyCar are struggling because they haven't reduced
yeah,
costs as much as F1 has.
yeah,
yeah. Well, I
Sure.
think I don't know if we're gonna talk about this later, but I know, IndyCar and NASCAR, for example. I think NASCAR is doing a better job than IndyCar, quite frankly. But IndyCar just isn't up to that level of innovation that even NASCAR or say F1 is. It's just like IndyCar is kind of, I felt like, at least for a while now, been kind of the shadow of F1. It's like, yeah, it's a good series, but what are they really offering these manufacturers?
yeah. Yeah, I was
That's
gonna,
kind of
I was gonna mention something kind of along those lines. Like F1 has always, like for so long, it's like whatever you see in an F1 car now, you'll see in a road car in I don't know
Right.
how many in a couple of years. So I think also with this thing where they're really focusing on, CO2 like emissions and all that stuff and going green, I think it also really aligns with the manufacturers. And I'm not like super well versed in this topic, but I'm assuming that's part of the reason. Like if F1 was going a different direction than what we're seeing with road cars, then I don't think we would have this much collaboration either.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I think IndyCar is slightly alienated, is because you look at the three other series, right? WEC, it's obvious, everyone sees that's basically a street car, like within terms of
Yeah,
like the
especially the
GT
hypercar
series
class.
and all that. Like you're looking at, it, you're like, oh no, that is a Lamborghini. Oh, that is a Corvette or whatever it is. It's like, yeah, like these engine, and it's more attracted to engine manufacturers because I don't know, it's testing long distance durability, stuff like that. All that's very important. F1, just like Marina said, those parts are going to end up in your street car eventually with the knowledge of that to a common like viewer, like, oh, that's even cooler, stuff like that. NASCAR, the cars look like street cars. The fundamental parts of NASCAR cars are going into like hybrids today and all that. IndyCar, again, I'm not educated, but I just don't know what is translating there for the engine manufacturers and for the fans to be like, oh, this is like, I don't know, like there's a connection here to like the car I drive at home or something. Granted, is that what we're here for?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe, maybe not. I personally think I'm there for the racing. That's why I love IndyCar.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. Where from an engine manufacturer's point of view, I fully get it.
It's also harder for brands. Like McLaren kind of changed that. Now there's a McLaren IndyCar team where you can see like, oh, McLaren cars, that's their thing. But there's no Ford IndyCar team. There's no Honda IndyCar team. They're just a bunch of independents.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's your point, Tristan. I mean, like, it's not like you're looking at these engines and you can make the argument with, like, you know, Formula One with Honda. But there's not really any engines you're looking at IndyCar that are being put in, like, road cars. I mean, not that they would.
Yeah, see,
anyway,
I just didn't know that. So it's like I wasn't sure what technological features are, you know. But granted, again, I look at IndyCar, I'm like, that's bad to the bone. They're going 240 miles per hour at Indy or whatever they're doing. Like, I don't care if that's not going in my car. They're just bad fast, and they're speed machines. Like, these things they're gladiators going into the arena every week to race those things. So, but again, that's my opinion. That's just me being a racing fan.
Yeah. The only thing is, though, that I'll say to that is, you know, I think, you know, where really the sprouting of motorsports started, it's like these, at the end of the day, it's marketing. I mean, it is a business, of course, but the reason why you put your manufacturer and have a race team or even like an engine manufacturer is to have that pedigree as a car manufacturer and be like, you know, we have all this racing pedigree. It helps with branding, you know, and that's why, you know, you see Bentley coming back into WEC to get that pedigree back. And, you know, Acura is doing the same thing, especially as a newer brand, you know. They're coming in at WEC doing really well, and that's helping out their brand as well.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Speaking of new brands and new teams coming to F1, a lot of new recent and stuff news with Andretti and a lot of conflicting views. FIA president and things saying, yes, we're good for more teams, 10, 11, 12. Other F1 teams saying this is going to cut into my stake, not only for, you know, like the prize fund that we'll talk about a little later, but, you know, also in terms of like commercial revenue. Like I'm selling shirts. If a little bit of people go over and decide they're going to be Andretti fans instead of Red Bull fans, then I'm losing money in merch. So
yeah, especially with a growing American audience. I mean, I see Andretti on an F1 car, I get excited. I mean, Andretti is one of the greatest names in motorsports from the United States, especially near us. They're from Nazareth, Pennsylvania. So, I mean, that's a good point especially with the merchandising. I hadn't really thought about it from that angle, but yeah.
And hopefully they'll be able to do what Haas hasn't been able to do, which is be like a good team.
That's so mean.
That's really mean. But what I thought you were going to say was going to say capture the American audience, because I remember they did a poll.
Well, that too. That's just what I mean. I just mean like better represent America. That's all I'm saying.
Not so much for Haas, but they did a poll in Miami, and it was only like 1 in 10 people are rooting for Logan Sargent. And I was like, it's American driver, American soil, and you'd think like some people, it's not like you don't have. There's not as many people that are so that are passionate about him or that want him to. I mean, everybody. I feel like most people want to do well, but you're not like he's not my number one. You know, even as Americans, I mean, we know Jason's Ferrari, we know Tristan, you know, Aston, myself with Red Bull, and so I don't even know, Steven, who your like number one is. McLaren.
McLaren. Yeah.
Well, I wasn't 100% sure, so I don't want to misspeak.
True.
It's
but
all good.
You know, like there's not many people have that number one that's Logan.
Yeah.
And maybe Andretti could come in and change that and be like, we're American, our number one team is going to be an American team, and it's going to be good, and they're going to have good drivers.
Well,
but you don't know. I mean, Haas tried.
I mean, looking at Haas, like for just my 5 cents, is they've had such an identity crisis over the past couple of years too. Like I remember that Rich Energy scandal they had when they what's it called? That guy who had that energy drink and then he didn't give them any money and then they had to go sponsorless for the rest of the year. Then they had Nikita Mazepin who brought in basically they made the car just look like the Russian flag. And listen, we're out of the Cold War and I understand all that, but most Americans don't like Russia. It's like, well, why would I root for a Russian team that's getting all of its money from Russia? So that team's been in terms of a marketing side, such a mess. That it's like that's why I don't root for him. I'm like, what the hell are we doing here?
Yeah.
Well, so you know, it's kind of interesting too. I know we brought the drivers thing. You know, in IndyCar, you have Connor Daly, who I know. I have a friend who is a huge Connor Daly fan, and you know, he's he's the American in IndyCar. You know, he's like the guy, and
He's
I mean,
awesome.
he hasn't done too well.
He's
He
not
hasn't done
doing
too
too
well.
good. Yeah, I don't
But
know
you
how
know
he's
what,
still
though?
racing in IndyCar. Oh,
He
money.
had
I'm
that
sorry.
on
Money.
at the 500.
Sure,
Yeah.
that's
Well,
all he should do is the 500.
The
one of the
500.
things that Connor,
Yeah, he's wasting the
Daly,
seat.
yeah, one of the things
Yeah.
he has going for him though, I'll say is though that really helps. I think his pedigree. He's always running those U.S. Air Force cars, and that's just
Yeah.
something you just don't see. I don't know that you will see in F1, but that's a thing that Americans love to see. You know, it's very patriotic, and you have an American driver in an Indy car. You know, it's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true.
I feel like there's also just a tiny bit, and I will not make the claim that Logan isn't proud to be American, but he doesn't have as much of that like true American pride that you would
Right.
typically see. I feel like he doesn't show it off as much because maybe people don't like that. Some people they don't like Americans, or they don't like that he's American, or they think that he shouldn't be in the sport because it's
Yeah.
more Euro based, or
Well,
just
that's what I
people
was
that
gonna
aren't
say
happy
too.
with the expansion to the US, that so he feels like he needs to kind of like shadow that a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's kind of the
Yeah.
vibes I
I think it's all over the place because I don't know. Has he really even had that much time to like? Yeah, sure. If he'd raced better, he'd be more time in the like camera or anything like that.
Yeah.
I feel like we
Yeah.
barely saw him this year. Like he was just like, yeah, maybe on the Williams social media and all that, but that's about it.
Yeah.
But I agree.
Yeah,
I actually do agree with you. Yeah. That's
I mean, the better you do, the more media time you get, right?
yeah,
So-
true. But I agree. It's
Yeah.
like that personality he has been showing. It hasn't really been that not accepting of his like American background, but just like I don't know. It's
Yeah.
like it's not anything. I guess I don't know.
Yeah. It's not nothing.
Yeah.
It's not nothing, but I don't know.
Not
It's
nothing.
Logan. He's
It's
Logan.
not patriotic, like, thing that I don't know if used to seeing is what I'm like getting at, but
Yeah.
Mhm.
But
Well, that's the
anyways,
thing,
let's
too.
move on. Let's move on to more of the cost side that we talked about earlier. We have mentioned this a couple times this year,
Mhm.
Destructors standings, and we were just talking about Logan Sargent. He is top of the Destructor standings, $4.3 million in damages this year.
Mm.
That's a butt of money.
It's
That
I
is a
think
lot of money.
wasn't Mick Schumacher closer to 6? So I don't
I
think
think
he
so.
was
It was
as
like
bad as
5.8.
Mick Schumacher.
5
Putting in
points.
that perspective, yeah.
Mick
Yeah.
had more
Yeah.
bigger crashes. Like Mick had that crash in like Saudi where it was
Yeah.
like brand new car. Like that car was trashed. Like there's nothing
Mhm.
you could salvage from it.
Yeah.
I think
Mhm.
whereas Logan had more of things where like he spun out and would like damage a front wing, maybe a rear wing, but
Yeah.
not like that the whole car was gone. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He had like little shunts and all that.
Yeah. And in general, he like started cleaning up his act towards the end of the year. So I think that also helped. Like Mick I feel like he didn't really fully clean up his act. He just kind of kept going the way he was the whole
Yeah.
year long.
Yeah.
But
There's been a
So
visible improvement.
yeah, for sure. And I think that's why they signed him for next
Yeah.
year.
Yeah,
Part
as
of the
long as he keeps improving, he's good enough to drive. Plus, he brings money to a team that does need money. So it's like not a
Yeah.
bad deal right now. Even though I want to see like
yeah.
Theo Porcher in the car, somebody exciting like that, like Felipe Drugovich. But
Yeah.
I think he's a decent option for them right now.
Yeah, well, also another one that I thought was really interesting. Carlos Sainz is second in the destructor standings because I think
interesting.
it's mostly because of the engine he had to take and the damage that caused to his car in Vegas, because he definitely wasn't up there the last time we talked about this. Because engines, I mean, I could be wrong, but from the research I did, they're run pretty costly, around what, 10 mil for an engine?
Probably for the
Um,
whole power unit, yeah.
For the whole power unit. So I mean, he didn't change. I don't think he changed the whole thing. He changed parts, but it's a
That's an
it's a
ouch.
pretty hefty price to pay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And Perez also up there. I
I was-
cannot get rid of the memes that say Red Bull gives you wings, with that video of him like
Oh my god.
basically flying.
Oh,
Oh,
God.
And Mexico
man.
turn 1. I mean,
Ugh.
kudos for him for sending it then. But yeah, that's not what him or the team needed.
It
No.
was just
Yeah.
a marketing strategy this entire time, you know. They just need more money, so they're just like,
They already
hey,
had the poster
Checo,
drawn
you
up.
wanna-
Red Bull gives
yeah.
you wings. They just need the shot.
Yeah. Checo, you want to go do us a favor? We need some more money from you, bud.
Yeah.
Go into turn 1 and go get some air.
We'll sign you next year. Just
Yeah.
Do this one thing.
fly away.
Well,
Yeah.
honestly, it probably, I mean, it'd be funny, but it's like definitely not worth it given how much everything
Oh
on
yeah,
an F1 car
that'd be
costs.
awful if that
I
was
mean,
actually the case.
Gearbox 350,000, front and rear wing like package 250,000. You got like the engine I said 10 mil, chassis are 700K. You know, even the steering wheels, which you would think is something relatively cheap, is still $50,000 because they have all the
Yeah.
buttons and all the technologies that
Yeah.
go with it.
Yeah.
You know, development. Even the Halo. I mean, the Halo runs 17 grand.
It's actually pretty incredible the
I
Halo
mean,
is
yeah.
that cheap compared to everything. Because I don't know,
I
I
was
look at the
gonna-
Halo as
yeah.
like that thing's so important. I don't know.
I was
But
gonna
that's
say,
yeah,
I mean, that's
Still
one of
17
the
grand.
strongest parts of the car. You know,
yeah,
that's one
yeah.
of the strongest parts of the car. So it's like you would think it would be more expensive.
One of the
really.
simplest, though. That's probably why.
That's true.
True,
I guess
It's just
true.
like a titanium bar with a layer of carbon fiber on the outside. So it's like,
Yeah.
Yeah, very simple but very effective. You know, invention because. And so what's the funniest part is that so many drivers, specifically Max, was so against it. It's like, I don't want this. This is bad. But it's probably saved his life a couple of times already
Oh yeah.
since then. So I think they're all like, okay, you know, we need this. This
I
works
mean,
for
from
us.
from a design perspective, I know for me, if I was an F1 driver, I would hate that too, just because you have that bar right down the middle of your view, which would bother the heck out of me. But I mean, the only thing they could do is do what IndyCar did, you know, and have like that windscreen.
Oh, the windscreen.
yeah,
Yeah.
but even they have a little bit of a bar down the middle.
Yeah.
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 But to be
I
fair,
remember
I
a
don't think
bunch
they're
of driver interviews at the time were like, oh, does it bother you? And like, maybe in a straight line, but most of the time you're looking right or left
Yeah,
at the
that's what I was
corner.
gonna say.
That's true.
Yeah.
Like most of the time they're eyeing the corner, they're either looking left or looking right. Anyways, they're rarely looking straight ahead.
Kind of what I was
So-
thinking is like, I almost feel like, especially if it becomes your job, like you're the race car driver, like muscle memory, just kind of forget it's there. Maybe, like I don't know, but
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if you get back in like your normal car and just like, whoa.
oh yeah,
What am I looking at?
There are drivers that don't like driving on the road. Like I don't think Lewis drives.
Oh, that's because I knew that. Yeah, he doesn't like driving a lot. I
Yeah.
know that. Yeah.
I mean,
There's
it is
some
one of the
really-
most dangerous things you can do on like a daily occasion, especially with their money. I would be hiring someone to drive me
Yeah.
everywhere. It's just like the NFL players who like there's always one like every year who gets like into a drunk driving accident or something like that. It's like you guys make so
True.
much money.
True.
Just hire someone, pay them
True.
like $15 an hour just to like drive you wherever you need to go. Like
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
life easier for
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
Well, and there's even drivers that go to the extreme, like Max. Remember when there was a video of him going like extremely fast. Where was it? He was like, and he almost got arrested for it. Do you remember this? This was on a
Yeah,
it
the
was right
Aston
before a
Martin
race.
Valkyrie
Yeah,
or whatever, right? Yeah.
yeah. So
Huh.
there's rumors that he was going to be arrested because
Hmm.
of I think it was parts in the car that he couldn't have. I don't know if it was like steering wheel or something, and then it was also like the speed he was going.
Yeah.
Which was not legal in the slightest bit. And it's just like I get it, like you love the speed, you live for the speed, but like you have so many opportunities to do that on track. Like just
Yeah.
go out a little bit earlier in FP1 and do a couple extra laps. You're gonna do about the same mileage.
The man is
Yep.
addicted to
Sure.
speed.
Well,
He is.
I am speed.
I spoke about this on my Fun Fact Friday. He recently installed all the stuff that he needs to be able to sim in his private jet.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. I would
So
get so
he-
car sick. Oh my gosh.
Completely addicted. But that actually leads to one of the things that we're going to talk about. We're talking about the cost cap. But one of the things that's not in the cost cap is the amount of money the team spent on travel, which is estimated to be about $100 million per team this year.
Mm.
And I
A lot of
don't
moving.
know, but I would assume that doesn't include anything logistical in terms of like car transport and stuff. Like I would kind of
Yeah.
assume that's just for team members and like
Maybe, yeah.
kind of stuff.
Because I honestly think that would be cheap if it doesn't include the
Yeah.
If it did include like transporting the car and all that, like $100 million for God, for how many continents we go to? Was it 5? I think 5 continents. Ridiculous. Yeah.
The most we got into the like cost of transport was, you know how Haas's pit wall is like half the size of any other teams? Like most teams have like 5 or 6 or 7 seats. Haas has 3 now. Gunther Steiner said, "Oh yeah, it saves us $250,000 a year." So if that gives a little bit insight to like the cost.
Yeah.
So I think it might add, or was it per weekend? It must have been per year. So maybe that figure does include like more than just team, but still, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a good thing it's not included because the total cost cap value is 130 million. But they added a kind for inflation, right? This year and last year.
Yeah.
And that's only the cost cap was set when we had 21 races. So they have a provision like if we do over 21, you get 1.2 million extra per race added on top.
Yeah.
Huh.
But there's a lot of things, like I said, travel, but also driver salaries. Top 3 highest paid staff members are also not included. And there was a big discussion on this when they were discussing Red Bull's breach of the cost cap and whether or not they breached it again, was Helmut Marko and Adrian Newey and all of their contracts, because Helmut Marko does not work for Red Bull. He works for a company that's like, he's like a consultant for Red Bull. Huh. And so then they were like, well, that doesn't count because he's external, so he should count for the cost cap. But he's like, but he's our top 3 highest paid, so he should then count, and then he doesn't, and then we don't pay him, and our company pays. It was
super weird.
Because
he's like,
agreement they have.
Yeah. It's like looking for loopholes, like, essentially.
Yeah.
Y'all can't see exactly right now, but my dog is right behind me. This is crazy.
It's just more loophole.
We have a new guest, a 5th guest on the podcast. Steven's dog. Hey, there it is. All right.
I locked my dog out because I didn't want her to make noise.
Yeah.
It's sad, but it's true.
He wants to be played with.
I hear mine downstairs right now. It's going to get a big hug after the podcast.
Other things that are not in the cost cap: marketing, legal costs, entry and license fees, which this year for Max is going to be a hefty one. I think it's like 1.3 million. If you think about, like, it's like 10 grand the base, and then they pay like, I don't know what the value is, but it's like per point you pay another couple, I think it's a couple grand. I'm not 100% sure on the number.
Jeez. Okay.
I did a video on it though. If you want to check out,
that's how the FIA makes money. Yeah.
And all of that stuff. But the team spent all this money. They got to make it back somehow. And part of the way they do that, obviously, talks about merch and that kind of stuff. But they also make money from the constructors based on where they finish. And I learned this today, actually, prepping for this episode. The money that they get from the constructors is a portion of F1's. It's roughly 50% of F1's commercial rights profit from the year. So it kind of wavers every year. There's never an exact amount. Last year, F1 made $2.57 billion. So the prize pot was out of 1.1, which is roughly 45%. It's a lot of money. So first place is somewhere around 130. Second place is around 120. And so on and so forth. It goes down from there. Actually, first place 140 and then 130 and 120 and kind of goes down and down.
So Red Bull's already got the budget cap covered from finishing first.
Yeah.
Even second place is super close.
Yeah. Red Bull and Mercedes pretty much get everything they spend back. And then after that, they've got to, you got to make a lot of money in merch to be able to spend. But also, if you think about it, we just talked about like travel costs excluded. If they're spending 100 million transport fees, and then they're spending 135 million, probably almost close to the dot on everything else, then you got to add in like marketing, salaries. I mean, they're definitely making money, but I wouldn't assume they're making tons of it.
Well, are those numbers like before or after sponsorship dollars get kicked in and stuff like that? I mean, like does Red Bull, like, obviously they're fronting a lot of the money to make it happen, so the team is like sponsored in that way, or like Aston Martin, McLaren with Google and stuff like that, who Google is not even, I don't think they might have ownership stake in the team. I don't think they do, but like they paying some of that. So yeah, maybe the team can operate at a profit because they're just like sponsor. I don't know.
Yeah, from what I've read is some of the big teams can be profitable. I mean, maybe not Red Bull. They're basically a marketing expense to Red Bull, the energy drink company. But yeah, like Oracle pays, I think, was it $100 million a year for 5 years? So like that covers a lot. And then like Aston crazy. Martin is also they got a ton of sponsorships, and they're also spending a lot though to upgrade all their facilities because they just built a brand new HQ. They plan on a new wind tunnel. McLaren just got a new wind tunnel. Williams is doing a ton of upgrades because they're so behind from being like stagnant like all the 2010s. So yeah. I mean, it's definitely a lot financially stable. From what I've heard is that now, this is really interesting that I learned. I was like looking for this, is that a lot of big sponsors didn't want to sponsor F1 teams, not because of exposure, but because they're afraid they would collapse. Look, we saw Manor Racing collapse. We saw Marussia collapse. We saw Virgin Racing and Caterham collapse. And big sponsors didn't want to pour a ton of money in the team just for next year, all of it go away. But now that F1 teams are so much more stable, they're able to sign with a team and know they could like build their brand with a team like Duracell. Duracell probably would never sign with Williams, but now they know Williams is and F1 is financially stable enough to continue for years. Duracell could like be there for years and build their name as like Williams with Duracell. So it's not just the new growth of F1 fans, but it's also like literally F1 teams are stable to build brands.
Yeah,
and I'm sure that also impacts, you know, you're talking about the engine manufacturers earlier, because they also know that they can go into a long-term project and not lose everything they've been working on, you know, in a year or two.
Exactly. Yeah.
So in general, the stability is it's helping everyone. I just wish we had that kind of stability with like regulations and stewards and stuff, because that would make the sport all around.
Yeah. Agreed.
Well, I don't think we have anything else cost cap wise except for F1. But there are other racing series, and what are they doing cost cap wise? We discussed IndyCar and NASCAR earlier. Did they have a similar cost cap? Because I honestly don't.
So, I mean, I could pull the NASCAR experience. So I understand that NASCAR with their new, I think it's the Gen 7. I can't remember exactly what gen we're in. But the car is purpose-built. The engines are purpose-built. Everything is built by a single manufacturer, handed to the teams. The teams are, obviously, the rulebook exists, but the rulebook is meant to be bent. That's if your car comes off the line and it is 100% definitively legal, then you're not trying hard enough. So that's just how NASCAR gets around it, is like, yeah, the teams are allowed to tweak and bend the rules, stuff like that. But cost cap wise, everything's set at a specific limit for each individual car. Salaries and all that varies because you have bigger teams that have more facilities. Like Hendrick Motorsports is going to be bigger than like, I don't know, Front Row Motorsports, who's been in the sport much. It's a younger team than Hendrick. And then there's also there's a charter system in NASCAR, which I personally think is bogus. The way it works is you have to pay an upfront cost every year for your charter for an individual car, and that locks you in for every race. So if you have a car and your car sucks, like you could be literally a 36th place car every day, but you own a charter, you have the right to go to that race, qualify for that race, and just run around 36th. Yeah, sure, you can get black flagged and get told to go off the track, but you're still in. If you don't have that charter, you can show up and technically get out qualify that car, that 36th place car, but the grid's only 36 places, they would kick you off because you're like, no, that 36th spot is filled. You don't have a charter. You're not racing today. That's
Like
unique
the
to the Cup Series.
107% rule. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
it's kind of unique to the Cup Series because obviously we know there's the Truck Series, Xfinity Series, and then the Cup Series. But cost cap wise, it's very different in NASCAR. I can't speak for IndyCar. I feel like Jason and Steven might be able to hint on that one, but it's spending is unique in NASCAR because you can spend all you want in certain areas, but certain areas are now like newly, like the car itself and all that is manufactured by a single person. Well, that's not a single company, handed off and said, all right, the engine, the body, everything that's there, you can't touch it, but everything else you can kind of fiddle around with and do your own way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I didn't know that.
It's kind of like a franchise. Yeah, they just buy the parts from somebody and then set it up for themselves.
Because, like I was saying, is how the engine manufacturer is no longer a job anymore. I don't know if I was saying this before the podcast or not.
Yeah.
Like the engine builders, that used to be a really. I personally thought it was one of the most unique things about NASCAR is the creativity that it came with the engine, like and all that, and those guys who like worked in their garages in like the 60s and all that. Like that's gone now because it's all one single block. Everyone does the same thing. But it's like, I don't know how to describe it. It's the creativity is limited, but it's more available in more unique ways now, if that makes sense. Like aero, especially aero wise, it's like, you'll see the car. I mean, 10 years ago, the car would be coming down a straightaway and it'd be stanced sideways, almost like crab walking down the straightaway, because it would get better aero turning to the left if the car was angled left going into the turn. And then they canceled. They found that out. They said, teams are doing this too much. We got to put them in a template, all that. The cost cap in NASCAR, it's much different. Much different. I mean, you can even look at like major league sports like baseball and all that. Like they can kind of do whatever they want.
Yeah, they don't have a salary cap.
No,
I mean, there's
what's
cap.
interesting is like international.
Just got. I mean, it's ridiculous the money that he's making.
Oh yeah,
that's a whole nother can of worms. I mean,
yes, it is.
The craziest thing about to me. I was just gonna say the craziest thing about it to me is that he deferred like 680 million of it until like after he's done playing.
A lot of athletes are doing that nowadays.
Yeah,
because it is getting to be a point. It's getting to be the point where, like, if they didn't defer that money, then they would not be a competitive team because they legitimately wouldn't have the spending to do it. Like Jalen Hurts for the Eagles, his salary, I think Steven, you know this, Jason, everyone probably as well. It's like it starts really small. I think he's earning like $3 million this year, and then next year it gets like doubled, and then doubled again, and then like he's scaling for later. But for right now, it's like, let's build and let's get this Super Bowl. Like that's cool.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's
And there's also a bunch of incentives in that as well, especially if you're like a player.
But what is IndyCar like with a price cap? I just don't know.
They don't have one. So
at all?
Unlike NASCAR, there isn't really a spending cap. If you just have the money, you could run the car. And it's kind of like they do have some select suppliers, like they're spec series, so everybody has the same chassis and same aero. The only difference is the engines. Like you could choose between Honda and GM, but they've gotten really close, so it's like almost doesn't matter. But Honda and GM do develop the engine, but they're almost the same at this point. You could choose some different suppliers, like like helmets, and I think maybe brakes. I don't know if that's standardized, but there really is none. But there's not, again, like NASCAR, there's not much to spend it on. So what teams have been doing is they're spending all their money on race engineers, and the single part you can develop, I'm pretty sure it's the only part, is the dampeners. A part in the suspension. So literally Penske and Andretti and Chip Ganassi have entire companies. Like look at this, like Penske Racing Shocks. All they do is develop the very best dampeners for their teams. So that's all the IndyCar spending just goes on drivers, engineers, and dampeners. And there's been this big battle between hiring aerodynamic focused engineers or mechanic suspension focused engineers. And it seems like mechanical is better because everybody has the same aero kits. Like, I think it was like Ray Hall hired a ton of like XF1 aerodynamic engineers thinking, yeah, we're gonna out set up everybody by setting our wings just right. And when everybody has the same aero kit, that doesn't really have an effect, and they were really slow this year. So yeah, IndyCar is in a interesting spot with costs, and like I mentioned before, is like Honda's threatening to leave because the engines, like Honda and Chevy, they aren't paid by the teams for their engines. They provide them to the series in return for marketing exposure and connections. And Honda are like, yeah, we can't do this anymore. It's not worth it. So unlike F1, that's why Honda's probably, looking to leave IndyCar.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap up with our quote of the day. This is an interesting one, and I don't think it's a very obvious one.
All right, Steven and I are out.
Yep.
I'll give you the one hint before I even say it. He's not on the grid this year.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Oh,
Kimmy?
Wow. That is broad.
Yeah, it is Kimmy.
That's Kimmy? Oh, we cannot hear you, Kimmy. We cannot hear you, but you still answer. Is that the one I'm thinking of? Yeah, I knew it. Yes.
Good job.
I got one.
On the board.
That was one. That's always in like I think the F1 does it all the time. Like just Throwback Thursday, like kind of like radio moments, and that's always in it. It's so funny. But you still answer. Love it.
Well, with that, thank you guys so much for watching. If you want more from us, you can check out our Tech Tuesday, WAG Wednesday, Throwback Thursday, and Fun Fact Friday, as well as some Man on the Street videos on our Lights Out Latest Instagram and TikTok. And of course, new podcast episodes every Monday at 11:30 Eastern Time. Bye, guys.
See ya.
Bye.